Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WayFinder podcast number 12. And this is the first episode in the education series. And this one is going to be on personal education. These are just my thoughts on the matter and sort of how I go through it. And to begin, I'm going to read selections from a poem called An Essay on Man by Alexander Pope. So here goes. Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man, placed on this isthmus of a middle state, a being darkly wise and rudely great, with too much knowledge for the skeptic's side, with too much weakness for the stoic's pride. He hangs between, in doubt to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or a beast, in doubt his mind or body to prefer, born but to die and reasoning but to err. Alike in ignorance, his reason such, whether he thinks too little or too much, chaos of thought and passion, all confused, still but himself abused or disabused. Created half to rise and half to fall, great Lord of all things, yet a prey to all. Sole judge of truth, in endless error hurtled, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world. That was from An Essay on Man by Alexander Pope. And the reason why I chose to start by reading this is that that's sort of the thrust of what I think personal education is. It's sort of how you sort of take care of yourself in the world, beyond what you do for a job, beyond what you do for a living, beyond society is what you take care of yourself. And so that's the way I think of personal education. It's self-care for the chaos of life. You don't know when the chaos is going to hit or when you're going to need to be ready for what's going to go wrong in life, because that's the thing. Something right now, this has been produced in the time of coronavirus. Nobody, that's not true. A few people saw it coming, but as a nation as a whole, we didn't prepare for it, and now we're sort of struggling through the times. And struggle is an individual thing. We don't struggle. We all struggle together, sure, but the suffering that's heaped upon and pain is felt by individual people, and so that's what this is about. So how do you get yourself ready for times when things may be going wrong? And the more I thought about it, so when putting this together, I realized that part of what I call health. So my thrust of personal education is health. And when putting this together, I realized that part of what I call health typically falls into the domain of character as well. For me, the word character has always been a mystery, because good character is sort of vague and changes sometimes contextually. And as such, what I'm calling health is what you rely on when life fails you. So this coronavirus is a time where sort of systems of political systems have failed us, societal systems have failed us. What can you rely on? What's that benchmark that you fall down to? Because I've heard this often said in the world, that you fall to the level of your training, you don't rise above, right? And so what I am calling health, and what the thrust of personal education is, what do you rely on when life fails you? So this is the example I chose. So let's say, for example, you lose your job or your professional credentials fall apart. Does your life fall apart too? And if it does, then you should really, it's a time to really consider. It's partly, in my opinion, because you're not taking care of your health accordingly, right? Because if your character and your health do not suffice, then that's bad self-care. If your character and your health are not able to help you wade whatever storms come through your life, then you're not taking care of yourself well. The way I see it, self-care should be what comes first and supports the paraprofessional and the professional layers of life and the self. I'm not saying this because I'm an expert on this. I'm actually struggling to do this too, and it gave me a chance to really think deeply about it, and that's why I sort of I've created my health domain as physical, mental, spiritual, and socio-cultural. So yeah, the quiz that I put together is not the end, but it's just the beginning that allows for deeper introspection and thinking and discussions on what self-care should look like. And just to reiterate again, self-care is what keeps the boat afloat, and thus it's more than just physical mental health. At least for me personally, when life is sort of weighing down on me, I don't mental willpower is not enough, and that's where I think my spiritual life and sort of the way I choose to present myself in society, or the way I choose to live in concert with the world, then comes in. The reason I prefer self-care over words like health and character is that you have to stress the self to really know what it is made of. And although we can easily think of stressing the physical and mental systems, it may be harder to stress the spirit and say even stress our ethics. But life is not easily dissected into each of these domains, right? What stresses your mind will typically also stress your cultural norms, as we're seeing now with the civil rights situations that's going on in the country now, and sort of the general sort of anarchy and sort of people's inability to understand simple preventive measures because they think it's political. So what will stress your mind typically will also stress your cultural norms and will stress your spiritual virtues. As such, you have to constantly keep these domains up. So you have to keep them up. You have to keep them energized and strong. Otherwise they'll fall apart. And as such, the way I see self-care, it's largely precautionary. We don't know what's going to come up in life, but our body, mind, spirit, and soul needs to be ready to handle it. So I'm putting this out there because, like I said, I'm not an expert, and it's actually because I'm not an expert. Life has swept me many times, and over and over again, I have to sort of restrain myself and sort of add layers onto myself. And I would say for my youth, I sort of relied just on my ability to grind through things physically, mentally. But as I got a little older, I realized that when that fails, I need to sort of have a spiritual guide, and that's my Christian faith, to help me get through more. And then I'm able to live in society, and that sort of puts constraints around me, which then gets into ideas that I'll share pretty soon. And it's worth noting though, and this is probably the key point, and this is why I'm sharing this with the world, is that in another regard, in this domain of self-care, it's really easy to become an ideologue, right? So you find an idea that works for you, and you see it working for certain people, or somebody gives it to you, and it gives you a certain solace, right? So life sweeps you, and you're falling down into nihilism, and you tap onto something, and you pick a position, and you substitute that for your own sort of critical appraisal. And unfortunately, this seems to be the way that just watching the world seems to be the way most people, and even the university, seems to be going, right? Where most people are becoming ideologues, right? And by that, not just cultural ideologues, but sort of even the way that they think physical health should be taken care of and mental health should be taken care of. It seems to be we're treating the complicated and complex self as something that can be solved with overly simple solutions, because that's what ideology ends up being. It's an overly simple solution to a complex problem. And in all of this domain, the way I see it, and this is not my own idea, but something I've gotten from various things that I've read, particularly the inserter, is that being wrong is not really, is really what you should be aiming for. Not to be right, but to not be wrong, right? Because you don't want to keep getting swept by the chaos of life, right? So you want to not be wrong, but necessarily you don't know what's right. It's tough to in this sort of in a domain of opacity. You don't really know what the right answer is, but you don't want to be swept up by having the wrong answer, right? So the key is not to be wrong. And so as I look through these domains of physical, mental, spiritual, socio-cultural, of domains of self-care, I don't know. And the more I think about it, I don't think we should regulate it to professional educators, because they don't seem to be doing a good enough job. And the way I've sort of gone about it in my life is that I've sought out specific role models who are doing things that have results, right? That has reasoning behind it, that seems to, and it's again, another word from the insider, it's Lindy. It's worked throughout time, and it's time tested. And that's the key. Time is the ultimate revealer, right? Time is the ultimate revealer. Time is the ultimate chaos monster, right? It reveals what works and what doesn't work. And so these are, for lack of a better word, they're highly personal and should be addressed by I think having parents and role models and instructions in life. And I think that's what traditionally has happened in society. This domain of personal education has fallen to parents and preachers and sort of the cultural guides and spiritual guides in society. But after a while, let's say after you leave the nest, these things are still worth developing, right? So I think that then there needs to be a way that you should structure your life so that you're still seeking, or maybe the key is to then become your own teacher in these domains, right? And that's, I'm still playing around with these ideas, but at first you begin as a student you apprentice yourself to let's say in the physical and mental domains, you apprentice yourself to your parents. You see how they live their lives and the times they eat and how they treat their bodies and how they operate in society. So in the physical, mental, and even the sociocultural, your parents are your first guides. And for the spiritual domain, you have your pastors and your faith leaders, and they apprentice you for the personal education. But then there's gets to a point where you have to sort of start to think for yourself. And I think what's gone wrong largely in society, just even thinking about it, is that our cultural and societal leaders, which has been relegated chiefly to professional educators and professional teachers, they've dropped the ball on their job, and that's why we're seeing. I don't think the riots. I think the riots are bad because they're coming from a domain of sort of resentment, and I think that's what we're seeing. A lot of our professional teachers are stoking the resentment in young people, and that I think that is playing wrong. And that's where I think this roles have been taken up by informal teachers through podcasts and blogs and books, and that's great. And the ultimate domain, I think, is to apprentice yourself in these domains under teachers, and then when you start to get your own ideas and see what works for you, then you become your own teacher, and then hopefully maybe become somebody else's teacher. And unfortunately, not all of us have good guidances from proper sources, or maybe they're not adequate, right? We're not apprenticed under people that teach us how to take care of ourselves personally. And I think I think for those people, I think the areas that they should sort of focus on, and this is the areas that I'm focusing on, this particular domains in this table right here, right? And in these areas are the key things that are worth thinking about as you go through life. I don't think there might be more in there than that needs to be in there, right? Maybe it's just the physical and mental that needs to be worked on. But I found that through life is that the spiritual and the social culture also matters, because it's so easy to fall into the domains of the ideologue. It's so easy to substitute your own thinking your own sense, for lack of a better word, your own sense making capacity for that of a party or of a group, right? Because in group dynamics are things that people want. You want to be part of a group, you want to be part of a tribe. And it's quite easy to substitute your own thinking mechanisms of how you should operate in society and sort of your spiritual mechanisms in life. And so I'm for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spitball on this key areas from the physical all the way to the social cultural, and sort of walk through why I chose this particular areas. And and before I even get and just as a disclaimer, it's not deeply researched. It's just what I have been doing to help myself when I get sort of when I inch towards nihilism, right? What do I do? How do I prevent myself from becoming ideologically possessed or fall into nihilism? And that's what personal education should give. And therefore, so Wallace said this perfectly, is that that's the point of a true education, is to be able to keep front and center in front of you that the world is complex, it's complicated, and that falling into ideology that's destructive is bad for you, and falling into solipsism is bad for you, falling into nihilism is also bad for you. So I'm just going to say why all these different areas can in fact bolster you against the storm of life that tends to drive you towards nihilism or solipsism. And then furthermore, just before I delve into them, and I think this is why it's perfect for personal education. Your job, whatever your career and job in life, should not, first of all, they shouldn't displace personal education. Personal education, like I said earlier, is sort of what everything should hang on, right? Because again, it's so easy to lose the self in the job or the career, or even the society, right? So this thing should exist beyond that. It should not be malleable based on how much money you're gonna get. Otherwise, you become fickle. You become too fickle, right? There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. So in these areas of self-care, I've changed my mind multiple times as I get more, as I learn more, as I try more, as I practice more, as I experience more setbacks. I tinker with my different approaches, but it should not be job dependent. It should not be dependent on and your job shouldn't overwhelm you so much that you can't even see the fact that your personal sort of education is being deterred. And because the way technology and information is, so we live in an age where information is being produced at the highest rate it's growing at a higher rate than it's ever growing, which means there's more information out there. So you need to have some ways of filtering all the things you're going to get, especially in the physical and sociocultural domains. I think those are the domains where there's a lot more being said now. I love Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, and everybody has something to say on in this, and even the mental people have a lot to say, and it's hard to discern. So let's jump right into it. So for the physical, I think nutrition, the two main camps that I've seen, and there's the paleo camp on one far end, and there's the vegan camp on the far end, and it's hard to but again, nutrition is important. What you eat, what you put into your body, the fuel you give yourself is important, it's tough to make that decision because it's an independent choice. Nobody's going to tell you what to put into your body, but if you don't have a filter with which to filter it through, then you get lost in it. So for that domain, I've chosen to go the Lindy approach, which is that man has been eating meat foods for a long time and it's not easily substituted. And sure, on the vegan end, there's the people who are vegan influencers who have said that this is the best thing ever, but it's fairly new production, right? Which means it hasn't gone through the rigors of time, and as such, I don't trust it as much. Same thing with exercise and rest is that I try to do as much anaerobic exercise when I put it into my schedule and get it done. And rest is also vitally important for that. And for the physical domain, all these things that have been said by better people than I am. I'm just kind of running into the things that I think need to always be thinking about, right? And that's the thing about this personal education domain, is the things that you should always be thinking about. And disease and disability, and the big one right now is that we're dealing with is sort of coronavirus, right? It's like, so, and this is where sort of having a more trustworthy sort of media will be beneficial. And but for all these things, actually, like I said, self-care is largely precautionary. I made a mistake when the coronavirus first popped up in the news, and I didn't know what it was, and I sort of didn't want to go with the mob on it. But there are a few trusted sources that I knew that were saying that this is an issue and we should take precautionary approach. And I think I got caught up by the wording, right? And this is of pandemic, or I thought it was being blown out of proportion. I didn't understand exactly what was being said. And upon realizing what was being said, I took a precautionary stance. And the same thing, and finally with aging. So with disease and disability, the biggest one that we're dealing with right now is obesity and sort of hypertension and things along those lines. And it's quite easy to, and that's largely even the sort of the big healthcare problems that we're having. And the reason why healthcare is so costly, one of the key reasons why healthcare is so costly is that people aren't eating well, and that's the thing, right? If you do the precautionary principles of nutrition, exercise, and rest, then you then take care of your physical health, and you can avoid disease and disability. Your odds of avoiding disease and disability sort of goes up, and it also helps you age healthier, right? And that's sort of the goal and that's how all these things are sort of structured, is that from the top end are sort of the things that most people will not see that often, right? So people, for example, let me just run down the line. Most people won't see your nutrition or sort of even see your self-control or that's what I call volition, or sort of what you hold as your virtue, your virtues and your models of virtue. And meta reality is just sort of what I call our shared stories, and sort of the archetypes that sort of feel. People won't see the archetypes or the virtues that you're playing into, right? But they will reflect in the bottom, right, in how you age, in sort of what your behavior and personality. It's a tricky area of research, because I found that it's not that solid as, I mean, the 5 traits, sure, but what I mean by personality is your behaviors. Then your behaviors will reflect your volition, sort of your self-control, and sort of there's a time for that, and there's a time to act rapidly, right? And sort of the rites and the rituals and the things that you do in your life will, on the spiritual end, will sort of be reflective of your virtues and your models of virtue. And on the socio-cultural end, your aesthetics will in fact reflect the shared stories that you're tapping into. So I need to think some more about this, but this is sort of the platform that I'm going on. This is the things I try to learn more about, because, for example, let's go into the socio-cultural one. I'm jumping around because I'm still thinking about these issues. But in the area of meta reality right now, so there's a camp of people right now that think that America is founded on oppression, and there is a truth to that, because the American nation was founded with some people being free and some people being slaves, right? And that's the story they've decided to go into, and that affects their ethics, sort of how they, so people are tearing down statues, tearing things down, are trying to reform the nation, and this the story affects their ethics and what they're willing to do to get there, and then it affects even the rigor and their logic, right? Because they've gone all the way back to 1776, but avoided the stories in between, right? The story of the shared reality that every great reformer has tried to work within, right? Lincoln was very rigorous. MLK, JFK, right? They were very rigorous, and they shared this idea that while of course we acknowledge the country was founded with some people oppressed, the country itself was not founded on oppression. It was founded to liberate themselves from the monarchy at the time, and that would affect how we then changed our presentation of how we're going to change, because optics matter. MLK had great optics, right? MLK's "I Have a Dream" speech, and no people will go, okay, this is not the time for optics and being patient and being diligent, but it's a time for outrage. But it's not the time for outrage. Outrage will never get you far. Outrage will just stoke outrage in the other people, right? And so on that end, right? So that's a sort of, so if I was to view this personal education ladder for social cultural, I'll say tap into, so history isn't the story we tell ourselves from history. The causality of history isn't clear. It's opaque. Anybody who tells you that it's clear and that there's a single story that happened is not being honest and not being truthful, because we don't know what led to what led to what. We know that there was oppression at the beginning, but we also know that people have fought over time to join a shared story of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And so those two ideas have to grind to each other, where we uphold the good virtues of the nation, and then as we increase the good virtues of the nation, we reduce the bad virtues of the nation, right? And to do that, we need to do it in a way that's, for lack of a better word, optically pleasing, right? And that's where the long game matters, right? And that's what I'm seeing, as because I'm not paying attention to the day to day of what's going on, but I'm sort of paying attention broadly speaking, and everybody calling for reform is not doing it in a way that can bring in the other side, right? Everybody wants to be in their own camps and ideologically attack each other, right? And if you do that, there's no room for compromise, right? Society, and that's the thing. Moving from the physical end to the social cultural end, right? This is sort of the domain of compromise, right? On the physical, on how you treat your body, there's no compromise there, right? It's your body. Ultimately, you're going to make your nutrition choices, and it's going to affect how you age and your risk of disease and disability and death and things like that, and how your exercise is going to affect that. But on the end of social cultural, we have to negotiate together. Okay, so I've covered the two far ends of physical, and why I think sociocultural personal education is important for your self-care, because if you're a person who's filled with negative stories of their nation, you then are outraged all the time, and maybe that's the best way to look at this, is that the mental is sort of the funnel that affects your life, right? So a lot of people are stressed all the time, and because they're stressed because they're tapping into the wrong stories. This isn't particularly clear to me yet, but I'm glad I'm doing this, because I get to think about it a little bit more. Is that maybe this 4x4 box should instead be a funnel, right? Where the social, cultural, spiritual is funneled into the mental, which then affects your physical, affects your stress levels, and sort of how you, and even beyond that, it affects your and it affects your behavior in society, right? And that's the thing. I don't choose to see myself as a mind reader, but you can look at a person's behavior and the emotional reaction and the sort of what they choose to create, and you can discern from there sort of what they're tapping into, right? So maybe that's it. So it's like sort of like an hourglass shape, where the social, cultural, and spiritual that they choose to align with affects the physical and mental at the bottoms, right? So I can't you can't change you can't change your mental and your physical without tapping into higher order ideals, right? And that's it. That's what I was trying to get to. Wow. Okay, that's quite a ride. Let me to summarize what I was thinking there. Social, cultural ideas and spiritual practices, and even social cultural practices are these higher order ideals that you need to be educated on. Otherwise, it will manifest in your mental and physical, right? Sort of what you tell yourself and in regard of what virtue is and what our shared story is, and sort of what is sacred in the world, and sort of how that affects your ethical practices, right? And sort of then how you then choose to operate in the world. That's sort of how I see rigor and logic is sort of, and that's the cool part about society and versus like something like, say, even physics, is that physics you have first principles. When society you don't really have first principles. You have, the way I see it, you have practices. You have standards of practices, right? Which are not, they're not first principles. They're malleable to change, right? But how are they malleable to change, right? What upon do they depend, right? And that's where sort of educating yourself on, and how do you go about doing that? How do you go about stressing that? That's something that I'll brainstorm at the end, at the final episodes of the education series. But what I'm really interested in is how is although people may not see, and that's the thing, right? I subscribe to the, and this is just to I guess to bring it all home. I guess I sort of danced around this idea a little bit just to bring it all home, and to go on to the mental. Sort of the mental is sort of the key area that we all seem, our society is big on mental health right now. But the stories that your mind is going to tap into, your mind needs to tap into some stories, in my opinion, to operate, or some standards of practices to operate, and not narratives, not simple narratives, but sort of mental, for lack of a word, models and maps of how to operate within society, what to be outraged about, and even then, how do you express your outrage? Not, and how do you in fact go about getting your outrage reduced, right? Do you become entitled, or do you choose to find a way to act and then become creative, right? Do you choose to find a way of working in the world to with society together, or do you then cry, right? So to affect the mental, the physical needs to be, you need to take care of your body physically, and then you need to also take care of what's going into your mind. Key. That's it. So the mental is seen very easily in our society through behavior and through sort of the way emotions are dealt with, and sort of self-control, how we choose to act. And these are guided by sort of spiritual education. So for me, what I do for spiritual education is I read the Bible, I practice on it, I listen to sermons, I also try and practice Christian virtues, and I also do comparative faith. I read, I'm reading Rumi, who's a Sufi mystic, and I also read from the Stoics, Shebara and Holiday. And so I do a lot of comparative faith, and I try and extract from them best practices and again, this faith, because they've lasted a long time, and people they've sort of helped people deal with rough situations. And on the socio-cultural end, I sort of try and see this nation and do a little bit of comparative meta reality, right? So what does the nation sort of, what's the nation's story? How do I see it? What are the facts? And from this facts, how can I link the facts together? And how does this differ to, I don't know, the ethics of another nation in the world, and how does that affect the aesthetical practices of the nation? And so that's just to wrap it up, right? And it's to say that the way, because stress is sort of the way the chaos affects life, right? So you may, something may happen, like let's go back to our initial example. Life may give you a setback. Maybe you don't get the promotion, maybe you don't get the job, maybe you get fired. that stress is gonna impact your mental health, right? It's gonna affect your emotions, and it's gonna affect how you choose to control yourself, right? And you're gonna maybe fall, and then despair rears its head up. So the mental is sort of what is what we're trying to get at through personal education. Is sort of how do we educate them? How do we? And by educate, I don't mean sort of pass a test, right? I mean, how do we deal with the vicissitudes of fate? And to do that, the body needs to be ready to be able, because the body is going to react, right? Because the brain is part of the body, right? And by working on by what you eat, and by exercising and resting accordingly, you can take care of what affects the mind. And also, as you're also not you're not we're not you're not alone in society. Society is cultural. Society has this news and this chaos all about, right? And that also goes into the mind. What do you choose to consume? How do you consume it? How often do you consume it? How do you go about sorting out the mess? All that then goes through the mental, and that can either add to your stress levels or help you reduce your stress levels. And so that's it. The personal education is important because you don't know when the crisis of life is coming, and you need to always be ready for it, right? And I personally am going through a bit of a crisis right now, but it's not that big of a crisis because every day I sort of I've over the past few months been putting myself in a state whereby which I can face it and I can have hope even in a situation that sometimes may feel hopeless, right? And for lack of a better word, I don't want to crumble beneath the weight of my life's catastrophe, and that's what self-care is important for. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and not the best one, but I'm going to keep doing this because I think it helps me figure out exactly what I'm trying to say. And I hope you gained something from it. If you didn't, please leave comments and tell me how I can get it better. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.